Who are some players you should be watching on your waiver wire early in the 2023 NFL season for fantasy football? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we begin another edition, another week of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player league. We're part of Locked On Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher for NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
All right, Michelle, we did some bold predictions to kind of close out draft season. I know some of you are still drafting, but this could be helpful for you twofold here. We're looking at players that you can look at late in your drafts / watch early on the waiver wire, depending on the size of your league, 10, 12, or 14 teams. Players that you just have to think about here on the radar, put them on your watch list here early in the season if you didn't draft them, depending on the size of your league. So we're going to break that down for you. We'll look at some guys that are definitely intriguing to add as we head into week one, and look at some guys that are definitely worth it, and then some guys that are just buzzing a little bit, but we want to see a little bit more in week one. So we'll get into all that for you in a moment. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free, available. Subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Michelle, I'm going to start with your guys here. So I'll hand it over to you. You've got 3 selections here for people that should be rostered in all leagues even before week one waivers.
Yeah, it's not always easy, right? So I just completed a few home league drafts this weekend, right? And those are only like 15, 16 rounds. I get it's not easy to roster everyone, but these are some guys that I'm seeing fall to the waivers. And right now I'm trying to figure out a way to make sure they're on my roster, at least one of these guys, right? Because I do believe that they're all going to be useful in fantasy and could be difference makers. So starting right off the bat here is Houston Texans rookie wide receiver Tank Dell. I've talked about him a lot this offseason, but so extremely productive in college, led the FBS in receiving yards, second in receiving touchdowns from 2020 to 2022. He and Rashee Rice are the only 2 FBS players to have 200 plus receptions and average 13 plus yards per reception since 2020. And he was extremely involved in that first preseason game with the starters on the field. Then he didn't participate in week 2 and had little involvement in week 3. But I think after that week 1 matchup, maybe I'm just making this up in my mind, I think the Texans are trying to hide him a little bit. They don't want defenses to know what special weapon they have. I think he's going to be highly productive this year in his rookie season. It might not be in week 1. It's a tough matchup, but I want him on my bench stash for this year. And then that's kind of the same thing here with these. I have 2 tight ends that you should consider picking up, especially if you don't have Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews or maybe TJ Hawkinson, like any other guy, I want one of these 2 as a backup on my team. And that's either Sam LaPorta, rookie from the Lions, or Jake Ferguson of the Cowboys. So for Sam LaPorta, we're going to see on Thursday, right? He plays on Thursday night, first game, what his usage is like. And I do think having a Sam LaPorta on your bench, I'm not saying to start him in week 1, but having him on your bench, he could be that difference maker type of pick or waiver pickup that you have stashed there that could actually score points in your tight end position, unlike the other, lame tight end you took later in your draft.
Yeah.
But right now, this is the Lions wide receiver depth chart. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Jones, Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, Antoine Green. The end. There's no competition at tight end with Brock Wright and James Mitchell behind him. The second target in this offense is either going to be Sam LaPorta or Jahmyr Gibbs. And at least for the first 6 weeks of the season, and I'm willing to take a shot, keep him on my bench to see if he's that second target there and able to perform, unlike other rookie tight ends in the past. And with Jake Ferguson, there's even more news that just came out per the Athletics. John Machioda, I probably butchered that. Sorry.
Should I
But he
think?
said after the draft, the number 1 tight end spot appeared like it would be a battle between Ferguson and second round pick Luke Schoonmaker, but the rookie hasn't been practicing because of a foot injury. And Ferguson is the clear number 1 and the favorite to get the majority of the targets that had gone to Schultz over the past 3 seasons. There's also reports from Jeremy Fowler that a Cowboys, some guy that works at the Cowboys, it's unknown who it was, but he said, do we look like we're built to be a run first team? And he said that they're going to be passing a lot more this year, which I've been saying all offseason long. They don't have the personnel to run to be a run first team. So with them being more pass heavy, there's going to be more targets to go around. And Jake Ferguson's actually a guy I'd consider starting in week 1 if you need to.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice for sure. I mean, I think you have to look at the role the Cowboys tight end has played here, Dak Prescott. So that's interesting that you also brought up Tank Dell and Sam LaPorta, because I actually added both of them late in my 14-team draft last week. So they were just my flyers. LaPorta was a backup tight end. Tank Dell, I was weak at wide receiver, so I took a shot here. I was loaded at the other position. So I said, okay, I'm going to add Tank Dell late of all the Texans receivers and see what we get here. So I do like Dell and LaPorta quite a bit. Ferguson, I just want to wait and see a little bit the usage between him and Brandon Cooks and Jalen Tolbert and Michael Gallup, just a little bit, to see what's going on. But I see the path to him being productive there. Now, my choices include a tight end, but I have a wide receiver and a running back on mine. So I'll start Tyler Conklin. I just think the Jets are desperate here for a reliable number 2 target for Aaron Rodgers. We're not sure who it's going to be. Al Nazard sure is there, but how active is he going to be? He's kind of just a limited receiver in my eyes, that he can do some things well. He can go inside, outside, versatile, all that. But I think there's a big drop-off. There's no Corey Davis anymore. They got to find someone reliable. And tight ends have been Aaron Rodgers' friends when they're available. And Conklin did really well last year when Zach Wilson was able to get him the ball. And he's the better receiver, obviously, between him and CJ Uzomah. They could have more 12 personnel on the field without Davis, so that's going to help Conklin stay there in key situations. So anyone playing with Aaron Rodgers and there's a chance to get some high leverage targets, you got to pay attention to. And Conklin, remember, the athleticism was key here. He kind of played well enough with the Vikings to get this deal with the Jets that he signed last year. So there's definitely some appeal with his athleticism as a target for Aaron Rodgers. Now, Marvin Mims is another one. I don't know what we're going to get from this Broncos passing game. And you look at the very limited depth. They didn't really keep a lot of receivers. They have Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, not much else at this position. Very thin roster there. And Jerry Judy's got the hamstring. Cortland Sutton has a series of injuries as well. So Mims could just have a big role pretty soon here if a couple things break his way. I think he even has a better path to relevance here than Quentin Johnston at this point, based on the status of the veteran receivers in Denver. And then Tyjae Spears, if you've got Derrick Henry, absolutely, you should be stashing Tyjae Spears. But even if you don't, I mean, you're looking at a back that could easily slide in the top 15 if Derrick Henry goes down. I mean, we know that we had some off-field trouble with Hassan Haskins. Tyjae Spears is clearly the number 2. He's one of the preferred handcuffs. We've been talking about Elijah Mitchell and Jerome Ford and some of these other guys. They've been hurt. But now I'm looking at Jalen Warren as one of these guys that if the starter gets hurt, big role. And this is the other guy, Tyjae Spears. So those are my 3 choices, Michelle.
Yeah, I'm really high on Marvin Mims. I think that's a great stash. So a lot of these, I think we're all saying like they're not week 1 starts. That's not what you're considering here. It's just players that you're going to have on your bench anyway. So like, would I rather have Adam Thielen or Jacoby Myers sitting on my bench, or would I rather what are they going to do for you this year? Maybe you can plug them in. Sometimes they'll get you 10, 12 points. It'll be okay. We're just saying take a chance on a guy that could actually break out and be just do crazy things for you this year if the right situation happens. It's riskier, but it's more worth having those guys sitting on your bench than just vets that are not really going to do anything for you. So I like those picks by you there for Marvin Jones and Tyjae Spears. We're going to get into the next tier of guys you should maybe consider adding if you have any space. Maybe you were able to move a guy to IR that will be missing week 1, or maybe you, for some reason, roster Tyler Boyd right now. I don't know why I'm calling him out, but drop him and add someone else with more upside. And we'll get into those in the next segment. But let's first talk about the Underdog Fantasy app. Football season kicks off this Thursday, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Underdog Fantasy and their Pick'em game. Just pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually spend kickoff night doing, watching the game. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, but you can win real money. It's legal in over 30 states, and it's a ton of fun. If you want to build your dream team today, head over to their easy-to-use mobile app or website, underdogfantasy.com. When you sign up with promo code Locked On, not only will Underdog double your first deposit up to $100, but they also have a Pick'em special live right now in their Pick'em lobby. Patrick Mahomes just has to get 1 yard for your pick to be correct. Remember, that's Underdog Fantasy. Sign up with promo code Locked On. Use the link in the description or scan the QR code if you're watching us on YouTube. All right, Vinny, do you agree with my sentiment here that if you are rostering a guy like Tyler Boyd or Alan Lazard, you should be looking for someone with more upside to stash at the end of your bench here?
Yeah, and I struggle with this part a lot sometimes in drafts. I look at these guys and I stare, and like the rankings say I should take these guys, and then this is how I end up with Tank Dell, right? I'm like, I don't want any of these guys. I'm just going to go for someone who can actually be big, and I tend to do that. Sometimes it burns me where I'm always looking for home run guys, like the boom guys, versus just I can scratch out 8 or 10 points out of this guy maybe in a given week in the right matchup. So I do struggle with not wanting to go after those guys. Maybe I should do that, but I'm all about the upside here. And I look at 2 guys. I've talked about these guys a little bit, maybe one more than the other, but my choices here are Ty Chandler. I just think we'll see what happens here. I don't know what you're going to get with this backfield again. You love Alexander Madison, but I'm not 100% sure the team is sold on him necessarily holding up here the whole way. Chandler has flashed a little bit, so he's definitely talented. He's definitely the number 2 there right now, even with the Myles Gaskin addition and Dwayne McBride being there. So Ty Chandler, again, he also could be, at worst, premium handcuff, right? If something were to happen to Alexander Madison, he's had some injury issues that you could look there. They could give the ball quickly to Ty Chandler in Minnesota, and it would not surprise me. So there's that player. Then Luke Musgrave, I know there's been a lot of buzz about him. It's been very hard, right, to determine between Sam LaPorta, Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, Luke Musgrave. You like all the potential of these rookie tight ends. You're not quite sure if the atmosphere is going to set them up for success, and also just the history is against these guys. Typically, you don't get rookie tight ends to be productive, and then you balance it out. Okay, but this tight end class could be special. So you got to think about all that and weigh all that when you're trying to decide if you're going to draft these guys. Now, with Luke Musgrave, I think it's a little bit like Romeo Doubs. Like Christian Watson is there, Jaden Reed is there, but these are the 2 guys in the middle that you would think, okay, they might have better value than we think. If it's a younger quarterback trying to get the ball out, maybe not as big play dependent, he's going to look the intermediate routes, and that's where you would say, okay, Doubs can do that on the outside, and Luke Musgrave can. So I think what it is comes down to, I think Luke Musgrave or Jaden Reed is going to be very valuable to the Packers offense. We're not sure who, but I think it's worth taking a shot on that player late, whether it's Reed or Musgrave, because, again, this offense is conducive for those type of players to produce under Matt LaFleur. So, again, sometimes it's a situation, but we're combining situation and talent to try to identify someone we can look at, and I think you have some good choices on that end as well.
Yeah, especially with Luke Musgrave here. I mean, with Romeo Doubs dealing with that hamstring injury, we don't even know if he's going to play week 1. And that could be an injury that lingers. So if Romeo Doubs misses any time, that's going to allow even more opportunity for, like you brought up, Jaden Reed or Luke Musgrave. So I like just taking the chance. Do not start him. Just keep him on your bench. See what happens there. Ty Chandler, I have no interest in. He would just be a handcuff to Alexander Madison for me. But did you know that Alexander Madison is younger than Ty Chandler? Did you know
that? Not surprising. Yeah.
Ty Chandler was a pretty old guy.
Ty Chandler was old, I think. He played in North Carolina pretty long. So I think that came into play. But yeah, it'll be interesting. This backfield, again, I want to believe so much in Alexander Madison. maybe I need just a couple games. Maybe if he gets 25 and 100 against the Buccaneers, okay, I might be all in, but I have to see it a
And
little
then
bit
it's
to
gonna be
believe
too
it. But
late because I roster him everywhere.
yeah, yeah. So we'll see. It's too late,
Yeah.
and we'll have to watch. Again, we have that competition going on with maybe Madison and Pacheco going forward. But I do like your choices, though, Michelle, including a running back that I think is maybe being underlooked here based on the situation.
Yeah, so it's Zach Moss of the Colts. I say it like that because I want to be completely honest. There, you will never find someone that loved Zach Moss more than I did. All right, coming out of school, I was so high on him, and he's obviously disappointed greatly. But he's only had 10 career games with 12 plus carries. That's it, right? He averaged 12 PPR fantasy points per game over those 10 games. That's nothing amazing, right? You're not like, oh, wow, that's crazy. But 12-point average is the same as what Jonathan Taylor averaged last year. It's the same as Miles Sanders, Travis Etienne, more than David Montgomery, Jerick McKinnon, all guys who are very useful fantasy assets last year and you're depending on. We know Jonathan Taylor is out at least the first 4 weeks of the season, and no one has any idea if he's coming back at all, at least for the Colts, right? Like this whole thing is very confusing. So you could be getting a running back that's a starter for a team for the whole year. Who knows? But Zach Moss may not play week 1 because he did fracture his arm earlier in the offseason at the end of July. But he's supposed to be back by week 2 at the latest. So maybe you don't have to grab him this week. Just keep your eye on how well does Deion Jackson perform in week 1. If he goes off, then yeah, maybe Moss won't get a ton of the workload. But if he struggles in week 1, Zach Moss is supposed to be the starter when he gets back. So definitely keep an eye on him and pick him up when needed. And then Rashee Rice, rookie for the Chiefs. Listen, he has such a low ADP right now. And I think it's likely, he's a rookie, but also, there's these reports coming out that he's not going to be a starter. He'll be coming off the bench, using packages. As a rookie, that doesn't concern me, though. That could change quickly if he starts making plays. I'm more of a Sky Moore girl. Like, I think Sky Moore is going to be really good this year. I'd rather be drafting him, but he's being drafted, right? Like, he's going
Way
late in
high.
drafts, while Rashee Rice is just being kept on waivers. So if you didn't draft Sky Moore and you want to take a chance on one of these young wide receivers that's going to be playing with Patrick Mahomes, I think Rashee Rice is a good pickup there. If you have a spot for him, I'd much rather roster him over, like I said, a Tyler Boyd or Alan Lazard or even a Jacoby Myers, because he has a big body. He has the talent. And he could become something, maybe not in week 1, 2, or 3, but down the line. So he's a guy that I'm willing to stash for a little bit here to see if he can become something with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, those are good calls. Again, you want some guys that could step into a big role, and I think both of those guys have that opportunity based on the current landscape of their teams. I think it's wide open. I think it's going to be someone emerges. We're pretty sure it's not Marcus Valdes-Scantling. We know that part, but it definitely Rashee Rice versus Sky Moore is going to be something to watch there. And who knows, Kadarius Toney could throw a wrench into all this, but I really think it's going to be one of the youngsters that really has a key role on this team before it's all said and done. It's worth looking at. Again, anything you attach yourself with on the Chiefs is worth doing in fantasy football because of Mahomes and all the great upside there. Now, we will talk more about the guys we're looking at on the waiver wire, maybe not to add right away or have on our roster draft late, but definitely guys that we might be talking about a lot next week in week 1, what they do. So we'll do that in our final segment here. Before we do that, I have to tell you that our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with us here on Locked On Fantasy Football, and we've put together a fun thing here called the eBay Motors Fantasy Picks of the Week. All season long, whether you're prepping for a draft like you are now or scouting the waiver wire, which you should also be doing, every week we're going to give you players that are going to guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway, still going for the upcoming season, let's see who we picked here for our eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. I'm going to talk about this guy again, Michelle. If you need an undervalued running back to help give your fantasy football team a smoother ride in 2023, then you should pick Chiefs second-year man Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco is a coaching staff favorite with his power running that quickly earned him a roster spot as a 7th-round pick last season. The Chiefs also saw he could reel off big runs, and he is a real asset as a receiver when given the targets. Expect Pacheco to have a shot at ample scoring playing off Patrick Mahomes. Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy football championship. eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and more than 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it. eBay Motors has it, and they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because they guarantee the fit at eBay Motors. It's going to help you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go for it, switch gears, crank up the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you'll know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All right, Michelle, I talked up Isaiah Pacheco one more time here in our eBay Motors pick of the week, but we have some other picks, deep dives. We're going way deep here for guys to keep an eye on in week one. And I like your choices, so I'll let you go first here. These are guys that I was wondering, why aren't they getting a little bit more love in fantasy football drafts just based on the situation? And I think you made some really good calls here.
So, yeah, these are guys that it's going to be really hard to roster right now heading into week one, especially if you have like 15, 16 man rosters. Maybe if it's a bit deeper, you can think about stashing them prior to week one. But these are guys to just keep an eye on with their usage. Like, how are they being used in week one? So, number one is running back for the Buccaneers, Sean Tucker. He's an undrafted rookie this year. And there's been rumors going around that he's going to be the team's RB2 to start the year, just behind Rachaad White. Now, number one thing to see happen, right? Is he active? Are those rumors true, right? That would be huge in itself as an undrafted guy being active in week one. That means he already beat out either Keyshawn Vaughn or Chase Edmonds for that active spot. And then we want to see how he's being utilized in week one. Does he get touches? Is Rachaad White doing well? Because Rachaad White struggled as a rookie, right? So I do think there's an opening here for a talented running back to steal some snaps, but also don't look at the draft capital for Rachaad White and think he has the upper hand over Sean Tucker just because Tucker was undrafted, because Tucker would have had the same or better draft capital if it weren't for the heart condition that was discovered like right before the draft, and no one knew what was going on. So no team felt comfortable taking him, but he's now cleared to play. And he promised you he would have been a day 2 draft pick if it weren't for that to pop up. But because he was so productive at Syracuse, he was one of just 4 players, FBS players, that have 3,000 scrimmage yards and 20 plus scrimmage touchdowns from 2021 to 2022. The other guys were Bijan Robinson, who went as the 8th overall pick, Zach Charbonnet, who went in the 2nd round with the Seahawks, and Deuce Vaughn, who, yeah, he fell to the 6th round, but it's because he's 5'5", 176 pounds. Like, it's hard to be productive at that size in the NFL. And then there's Sean Tucker, who, like, I'm a Syracuse fan. I grew up in Syracuse, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think he's extremely talented running back who can also catch the ball. So I'm a little bit worried about Rachaad White right now if Sean Tucker, gets to be active and gets this playing time and gets trust from the team. And then also for my second guy, it's Cole Turner. He's the 2nd-year tight end for the Commanders. He was drafted in the 5th round last year. Didn't do anything as a rookie, 2 receptions, 23 yards. But he was also very productive in college. One of 5 FBS tight ends to record 1,300 plus receiving yards, 20 plus receiving touchdowns since 2015. 3 of them are Ravens tight ends, weirdly enough, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Charlie Kohler. And then also Brock Bowers, who will be a 1st-round pick next year. So Cole Turner was very productive at school. Maybe this is the year he can break out. It seemed like Sam Howell had a strong connection with him in the preseason, had 5 targets, tied for the 2nd most on the team from Howell during this preseason. And yeah, Logan Thomas is back healthy, right? So he's probably the starter, and maybe they'll be loyal to the vet and give him more snaps. But he's 32 years old. He's hurt regularly. And like I said, if Sam Howell feels comfortable with Cole Turner, you would think they'd try to get him on the field more. So just a guy to keep an eye on with his usage in week one.
Yeah, I do like the fact that you picked a Tucker and a Turner, and they kind of sound like they could be country music stars. So I like that. But I also saw a lot of Sean Tucker at Syracuse, and I had him in the top 100 in my early draft ranking. So I really like this back, and I don't think it was the best situation for Rachaad White to have this guy behind him. He is a very good back overall, and again, the medical issue was the only reason that he would have slipped at all this draft. I mean, I was shocked that he wasn't taken, then we found out later. So I do like this guy, and I was looking with the Commanders, doing a little bit deeper dive here, that do you really trust Curtis Samuel's their third target? I'm not sure how much he's going to be involved. I think Antonio Gibson obviously will be a big part of the passing game, but you have Terry McLaurin hurting early. This transitioning to a younger offense, right? It's Sam Howell, Jahan Dotson, and some of these guys get on the same page. And I really like this player Turner. And I said, okay, maybe he has an opportunity here. And the Commanders, it's Eric Bieniemy, and we know who he had at tight end. I mean, there weren't a lot of other guys behind Travis Kelce doing anything, but Eric Bieniemy knows the value of a tight end and what they can do with the passing game. So this is a guy that maybe has not even been mentioned in fantasy football circles until this time, but I think there's that. And I kind of make him like a poor man's Juwan Johnson, right? Where does he fit into this pecking order? But there's an opportunity here. So I really like this call with Cole Turner and Sean Tucker. So I'll go with a couple guys also that it may not be mentioned anywhere in fantasy that much, but Puka Nacua from BYU. The Rams don't have a lot at wide receiver right now. Cooper Kupp is banged up. Van Jefferson is more of a complimentary receiver. And then you've got Tyler Higbee at tight end. There's not a lot here. Ben Skoranek, he's just a guy at this point. Like, he's just going out there, not doing a lot for Sean McVay. So now you have Puka Nacua. I think there's a lot of Cooper Kupp in him, that he's very technical. He loves the game. He can do everything inside and outside that you ask from him. And I think Sean McVay's liked him early. So there's an opportunity here, right? If Kupp is on the shelf, if he has any setback here that keeps him out of action, Jefferson is not reliable at this stage. This Rams defense is going to be atrocious, I think, on the back end without Jalen Ramsey. They're going to have to throw quite a bit. They might want to try to run, but there's going to be some volume here for Puka Nacua. And I just think this guy has been underrated in terms of his skill set and talent. And I think he's in the right spot with McVay to unleash that. So watch out against the Seahawks. They have a couple secondary injuries. We know that they're going to fight through early in the season. They're a little bit tougher in the slot, but on the outside, they do have some weakness away from Tariq Woolen. So watch out for Puka Nacua having a nice opening game where he's going to be a waiver wire pickup. And then Justice Hill, this guy is stuck on the Ravens because he's a great special teams player. But really, since he came out of Oklahoma State, has not gotten an opportunity. I thought he was a really good runner in college. I thought he was going to get a bigger shot in this backfield, especially with these other guys being hurt, but then he got hurt. So that didn't really help behind J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. But they like this guy. He's right there behind these two guys coming back from major injuries. They could use him a little bit more than we think, because I think he's kind of one of those players like a Raheem Mostert. Remember that he started on special teams and kind of the coaches liked him and they kept keeping on the roster. And he said, why did they do this? And then they had a big injury. They plugged him in. They got some big numbers out of Mostert. And then we've seen him be an established back that's coveted now by multiple teams. So when you look at that, I think Justice Hill might have that little bit of late bloomer trajectory that we're looking at. So I'm not sure if they're going to give J.K. Dobbins a full workload. He's coming back from major injury. That is not easy. Again, he's been a banged up guy. They want to probably preserve him a little bit. So I'm not quite sure Gus Edwards is going to be the guy necessarily. I think Justice Hill also gives him a little bit more of that versatile receiving ability as well that Edwards does not. So it's more interchangeable where they're not maybe telegraphing the plays here in what's supposed to be a more pass-oriented offense. So I've explained these guys pretty in depth here, going in deep, but hey, I have to sell them, and I don't know what you think about my choices there, but again, Nacua and Hill are my picks here for guys we might be talking about on the waiver wire this time next week.
Yeah, I like the Puka Nacua pick a lot here. He's getting a ton of attention, great reports out of camp, and it seems like the Rams are really high on this kid overall. And with the Cooper Kupp injury, like you already mentioned, I mean, the opportunity is wide open. It's a big reason why I like Cam Akers and Tyler Higbee in week one. Again, Tyler Higbee is a guy that you should be considering picking up and starting in week one if you don't have a tight end you're confident in. But it's because who in the world is Matthew Stafford going to throw to? So Puka, I'm not sure I 100% am on board with him succeeding in year one, but at the same time, there's for these rookie wide receivers, like he is in an elite situation right now with so many opportunities for targets. So I don't mind picking him up, stashing him to see if he's utilized and he can get it done quickly here at the start of the season. Justice Hill, I'm not totally in on because I think you would need injury to J.K. Dobbins. And in that case, then I would rather, roster Gus Edwards because I know he would be the guy to get almost all the workload in the backfield if Dobbins were to go down. So for Hill to have any significance, I think you have to have J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards injury, which has now happened 2 years in a row. So could be possible. But I think he would probably not a guy I'm looking at just yet for off waivers.
Yeah, I think it just depends how they use him. And I'm not quite sure that they will use him as much as we would like, but definitely they're higher on him as just a pure runner than they were just a couple of years ago. So we'll see how that plays out. Again, 2 injured backs. They're still trying to sort it out. And we know Dobbins and Edwards don't have the greatest track record with their knees. So anything could happen here in week one. And I also could see the Ravens blowing out the Texans, and you might see Justice Hill come in and look pretty good. And then, okay, you maybe been on our radar here behind Dobbins. So that's another thing I'm thinking about, that these guys could also all of these guys could impress us in week one. And that would be something definitely to make us watch. And not just as flashes in the pan, but maybe some players that could really help. And we'll do the waiver wire here for you usually on Tuesdays on Locked On Fantasy Football. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen to Everydayers. We'll have some last-minute draft tips for you. Then we'll start looking at week one, Michelle. We'll look at the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end rankings there in the middle of the week. And then close looking at some DFS prices there that you can target some players and make our picks of the week for that as well to close the week on Friday. So a lot of stuff coming up here. Can't believe it's week one here. We'll have Chiefs and Lions on Thursday. Those will be the teams playing on Thursday night. And we'll have the Giants as well, but they'll be playing against the Cowboys on Sunday night. So a lot of good stuff. Getting ahead of myself. Very excited for this weekend. I do have to tell you that there's an exciting thing here on the network. Locked On Ultimate NFL season previews here. The 7-episode extravaganza brings opinions, analysis, and plenty of debate, just like this show, from all 32 of our Locked On NFL hosts with added insights from our national experts. It's a can't-miss series before the season kicks off. Catch every episode on Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're getting your podcasts. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.